Definitely following this story, and we're going to be having a number of updates just to let you know what exactly is happening, because this is a significant matter. And for the benefit of anyone who may be joining us at this moment, ODM leader Raila Odinga is dead. The former Prime Minister, who has been undergoing treatment in India, passed away this morning in the Indian city of Kochi. He was 80 years old. Now, multiple sources in the former Prime Minister's office and those in his party, that is the ODM, as well as sources in government, have all confirmed Odinga's death. Earlier, a number of Indian news outlets had reported that the ODM leader had collapsed while taking a morning walk before being pronounced dead in hospital a few moments later. 2 days ago, Raila's elder brother, Dr. Oburu Oginga, confirmed that the opposition leader was undergoing treatment in India after speculation swirled around his health and whereabouts. The president is expected to make the formal announcement in any time now, that is after a security briefing, and we shall be carrying that live the moment we have it. And we are also live, we're going to be live at different locations, which include Bondo, as you've seen with Ibrahim Karanja. We also have Michelle Ngelo Diambo there, Ruth Sarmwe. We are covering this from every end there is, and getting reactions also from across the country, because this has thrown the country in what many would call national mourning. And I'm now joined in studio by our editor-in-chief, that is Joe Ageo, as well as our managing editor, broadcasting and new media, that's James Smart, to just have a review and discuss what this means for the country. And even, let's start with you, Joe. Having covered Raila, you're probably the person who's interviewed him most, you know, and having covered Raila, how does this feel for you now?
I mean, it's a monumental moment for the country. I mean, this is not someone who just belonged to his family, obviously. He has been a permanent fixture in many respects in our political landscape for many years. I mean, I started covering him, I think it should have been 99, at what they called the cooperation with the Moi administration at the time. And seeing what has happened in his political career, living true to that moniker they gave him, which is an enigma, because at every turn he seemed to surprise friend and foe, sometimes in ways that earned him praise and others not so much. But at the end of the day, he's this person that it was difficult to imagine the politics of the country without Raila Odinga. And therefore, for me, it's the question of, wow, is this really true? This is big, this is different. And to just imagine, even for a second, talking about Kenya and not mentioning Raila after a few sentences is something that I think even a lot of Kenyans will take time to actually get used to. But I think it really is a significant moment in the country. Sad, because he is someone who's played a significant role in the country's history. Certainly his role in the new constitution that we have. Certainly his role in devolution, which I think he championed very consistently, even the many times he joined the government of the day. And so I think this is a movement that will remain etched in our history for all manner of reasons, I think for many, many years to come. So for me, as someone who's covered him many times, someone who has interviewed him and a number of times, one thing I know for certain that he was one of the very few politicians who truly believed in something called the country. That at every turn you may disagree with his existing political positions and all that, but then he is the one person who, one of the things that you speak to people around him, you listen to him, that motivated him the greatest was this idea that yes, we may have differences, but there's a point beyond which we cannot go if it involves, therefore, destroying the country. And I think that for me was something that stood out, just having covered him for those many years and also listened to him speak about what he believed about the country. So he will have, I think, a mixed kind of legacy that, you know, many people will say many things about him, but that thing that I think you can't take away from him, that he had this sense of country, unlike very many politicians today.
All right, Smart, what are your initial thoughts and feelings about this situation?
I think, as Joe says, I think nothing demonstrates what Raila was and what he represented other than this humongous sense of what the country needs and his place in securing the country. I think I have an anecdote. In 2008, immediately after the post-election violence, I was covering him, and he goes to Kibra in this church. I think it's the first or the second Sunday when the violence has kicked off. And he goes to this church, and there's testimonies, numerous testimonies about the violence that has occurred in Kibra, the kids who had been shot and killed, and he listened. And we took copious pictures and videos of him literally crying when he was hearing these stories of women saying what was happening to them at night at the hands of either police or, competing, other groups. And in that moment, when he woke up to speak, this is at the height of this conflict where everyone is saying we need to go for a repeat election. This man has won, ODM has won. And he took the microphone, and I remember him giving this analogy. And he said, in a house there's 2 children and a mother, and there was one sweet. And the sweet was given to the children to share, and one child has taken it. And then he says in characteristic, voice, akameza. And then this other child is crying for it. And then he says, what should the other child do? He poses this question. And he ends up saying, what I think this child should do, the other child who doesn't have the sweet, he should wait for another sweet to be brought home. And we picked up the cue because from then on, he developed this conciliatory tone that was uncharacteristic of what were his mates then. Everyone then was clamoring for either a repeat election or an announcement that, he's the presumptive president. But he took this tone out of the turn, just to buttress this point that this was an incredibly tactician politician, but he was also very human. As Joa said, interviewing him, you get 2 senses and 2 sides of him. The side that, you sit there and you can see how his mind is working out through things, how he can quickly, give anecdotes. He has very sharp memory of things in the past and connect them to the moment. But then when the cameras were off, he remembered odd details, like, oh, you were just in the other station the other day, how's your son doing, and everyone, I think, who had met him would have those things, that he was a very personal politician. He was big, larger than life on stage, but also in person, he had capacity to be a human being. And I don't know about your stories with him.
Yeah, I mean, and just one thing, I mean, it must be a very strange twist here, because apparently today is Oburu Oginga's birthday, 15th of October. So he turns, I think, 82 today. And this happening on the day that his younger brother, who was, for all intent and purposes, the leader of that family. I mean, if you think about it, Oburu was older than Raila, but in everything that happened there, he always deferred to the younger brother, and so that must be a very bitter sort of birthday for him. But yes, James mentioned something important. I mean, there was almost this 2 personalities between the man that this larger-than-life profile. He had all manner of names, Agwambo, Enigma, all those things. And so if you had never met him, think is this guy who has horns and this. But when you met him, he was even the way he spoke, he would be very soft-spoken in those personal moments. And when he takes to the podium, he's a totally different figure. And that, for me, was fascinating to watch. But I think one of the things that James mentioned, which I think is extremely characteristic of the kind of person this was, just, I think, partly nurtured by the political period in which I think he grew, having grown up as a member of a political family. He would talk about African history, for example, like he was there, talking about the Nkurumas of this world, the Abdel Nassers of this world. He had African history as its fingertips, but he didn't stop there. When you came to the Kenyan history, he would tell you what happened in 1922, tell you about Haridhuku, tell you about all these freedom heroes, Bildad Kagia, Kungu Karumba, and you name it. But then also, a lot of people will tell you from the part of the country where he comes from, that even when many people would have had him trace his roots to, I don't know, Nabongo, Mumia, and all these things. And it was a fascinating story, just his grasp of those lineages and to where he believed he traced his roots. So he was a lover of history, had a sharp memory, and he was able to then put context to this whole thing. In fact, even when he was running for the AU seat, it was unfortunate that it came in the context of a very different political environment, which to many minds contributed a great deal to what happened to him there. But you could tell that he had this grasp of African issues, whereas he was in his late 70s, that time going to 80, he actually had a good grasp of what the current issues in Africa were, whether you were talking about the AI revolution, whether you were talking about this whole trade barriers that make movement and trade in Africa very difficult. He had those issues at his fingertips, and he had a thing about talking about the big issues when he was out there with different heads of state, African infrastructure, and perhaps because he was an engineer, he loved this thing about roads and all kinds of telephone networks and things like those. And I think that set him apart in that respect as well, as someone who understood, he had a sense of Africa. He was that much more Pan-Africanist than you would find many leaders today. And like I said, I think that may have been informed by the fact that he came from a political family. I mean, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga had all these people we talk about as his contemporaries. Yeah. So whether it's Nyerere, whether it's Obote, whether it is Nkrumah, those are people that he must have seen in his childhood, probably visited and that kind of thing. And so to that extent, therefore, he developed that sense of the bigger picture, which then he tried, I think, sometimes very successfully, at other times not so much, to bring in his politics.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to stop here for a bit so we can cross over to Kisumu County, where we have our Western Region editor, that's Ouko Kusa, standing by to give us an update and the response and the reaction and the feeling of the people of Kisumu. Okusa, take it over. Hear me?
Yes.
So if you can hear me, what's the update in Kisumu County?
Nakupata. Well, it is a sad morning here in Kisumu. Actually, where we are standing is right in the middle of Kisumu town. That is Odinga Street. And just a couple of minutes ago, a huge crowd of mourners had just taken over the streets behind me here, and most of them women wailing, crying, and of course chanting songs in honor of the late Raila Odinga. And of course that has caused a lot of somewhat tension in the city here, a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of motorbike riders running around hooting. And of course, we've witnessed a couple of shops now closing, probably in honor of the fallen ODM leader Raila Odinga. And of course, we are expecting that this mourning that we've just witnessed right now, a couple of minutes ago, is going to extend to other parts of the town. We've just been to places like Kondele and of course the bus park, where we've witnessed so many residents over there expressing their sadness and of course coming out to mourn this sudden death of the ODM leader. So that is what is happening here, and of course we will keep on just checking out what is happening. As you can see, the streets have kind of started remaining a bit deserted. This is not the way it was in the morning when we woke up. And of course, Odinga's street at this time of the day will be teeming with traffic. But that is not happening. Even as you can see from the footage there, a lot of people have come out of their offices and they are standing just right on the street, not sure of what is happening. What is really, again, what they're saying is that they're waiting for official announcement of this death, because so far they're waiting for the president actually and the family to officially announce the death of the Prime Minister, or the former Prime Minister. But as that is still, as the country still awaits that, as the country still awaits that, we are seeing the people who have poured on the streets to mourn Raila Odinga. Remember, this part of Nyanza, or this part of Kenya, is where Raila used to enjoy a lot of political following, and of course this death has definitely hit hard his supporters, the ODM supporters, which he led for several years and several decades. And therefore, it is expected that his death will definitely cause some extensive amount of emotions, will provoke a lot of emotions among his supporters here. And therefore, what we are witnessing is just the beginning of it. We are expecting to see a lot of mourning and a lot of mourners taking over the streets here just to express their emotions. So that's going to happen. If you can see even in the pictures there are people who are just seated on the streets here waiting. A lot of people at the same time are yet to actually believe that the ODM leader has really passed on, and therefore a sizable number of residents here we've spoken with are yet a bit uncertain whether it is really true that the ODM leader is no more, and therefore it is causing a lot of anxiety from people of all walks of life here. But that aside, there's a lot of mourning. Even motorbike riders have taken over the streets, and they're wailing and hooting and all that kind of a thing. So we expect that this will even intensify as the days go by, and we'll be here to keep our viewers updated. Of course, we've been trying to trace back the last time Raila was seen in public in these parts of Nyanza, and I think our last encounter with him was somewhere in Nyakach at a funeral, where that is so far what we can trace. That the last time we actually covered him was at a funeral in Nyakach sub-county, that is within Kisumu County, and after that we've not been able to see him public again. But all the same, this is some news that has caught supporters down here with a lot of surprise. Taking into consideration that just the other day his wife Ida Odinga had assured Kenyans that the former prime minister was out of danger and was recuperating well in a hospital. Yeah. So as I've mentioned there, you can see residents still a bit apprehensive and anxious and uncertain. Just across the street there is the Diamond Trust Bank. We've seen security there closing its doors just to be still uncertain of what's really happening. So let me just allow you to check. Like I was saying just a while ago, is that we expect that this morning will intensify, and that's exactly what is happening right there on your screen right now. Huge. All right. Let's hear what's really happening out there.
Those are live pictures from Kisumu County as well as Bondo in the county of Siaya, which is the home of Raila Odinga. And we have our team that is heading and already at, we have people in our team already at the Odinga home, just waiting for any developments, any announcements from there, as we also wait for the formal announcement by the president. And we're already seeing a lot of condolence messages being sent. I'll just read some of them. We have John Mbadi, who is the CS for the National Treasury, or some would say the expert from ODM who joined cabinet. He says, painful. In him rests a towering African democratic giant, fighter for social justice, mentor and father. When history of Prime Minister Raila Odinga shall be written, it won't go untouched. He died a peaceful man who put the interest of the country above everything else. R.I.P. Baba. We also have a condolence message from Abiy Ahmed Ali, that is the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, saying, on behalf of the government of Ethiopia, I extend my sincere condolences on the passing of former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga. May he rest in peace. Then we have a man who has been very close to Raila Odinga, and that is Salim Lone. And I'll just get some excerpts of his condolences. He says, this is the saddest day in our history. Kenya will never be the same. Millions of hearts have been broken, mourning the passing of a leader who was never allowed to be president. And yet he still remained beloved for many more years than any president ever was, because Kenyans knew he was the one making sacrifices and fighting for a better life for them by reducing our gross inequalities. While all our presidents curtailed our freedoms and rights to entrench their power and wealth, Raila's vast popular following allowed him, without ever holding power, to enlarge democracy and inclusion for the struggling masses and the marginalized communities that languished in the farthest corners of this great land. That is why, despite at least twice winning the presidency, it was the loser who was announced the winner, and that is from Salim Lone. And we are also now joined in studio by Philip Kisia, who is not new to many of us. He has been in the political circles, he's been leadership in Nairobi. Karibu sana Bwana Kisia.
Yeah, and just a couple more condolences. And good to see you. Yeah, so David Maraga, former CJ, says, I'm shocked to learn of the demise of former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, a patriot, a Pan-Africanist, a Democrat, and a leader who made significant contributions to democracy in Kenya and Africa. He says that Kenya has lost one of its most formidable leaders who shaped the trajectory of our beloved country. Africa has lost a leading voice in pushing for peace, security, and development. The world has lost a great leader. And he goes on to send his condolences to Mama Ida Odinga and the entire family, the Kibra constituency, which Raila represented for many years, the people of Siaya, where he hails from. And he says, may the Lord comfort us all as we deal with this enormous loss. There's also a condolence message I think I saw from the executive director, I think it is, of IGAD, who Dr. Wokni Gebeyehu, who says that today Africa mourns the loss of one of its most iconic sons, His Excellency Raila Odinga, an unwavering Pan-Africanist. He dedicated his life to the pursuit of democracy, justice, and unity. His lifelong struggle for freedom and equality inspired generations across Kenya and beyond, reminding us that leadership is not about power, but about service and sacrifice. IGAD stands with the people and government of Kenya in this moment of profound sorrow. His legacy will forever echo in the democratic foundations he helped build and the enduring hope he instilled across the continent. He says, may his soul rest in eternal peace, and may his example continue to guide us toward a freer and more united Africa. And there's a response that has come from the PS, Kori Singoe. Thank you for your words of comfort, Excellency. I think this would have been a good time for there to be that announcement from government to put things in perspective. But lots of condolences done coming in for this man who, as I mentioned earlier, was a permanent fixture of Kenya's politics for all of, I think, 4 decades plus.
Yeah, and just this morning, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, has adjourned the sittings owing to this news, and we shall be getting that footage not too long, where we even have some members of Parliament who broke down upon this news being confirmed. And so we shall be getting a lot more of the feedback and comments and the condolence messages to a man who cannot be ignored when you think about Kenya at large. Bwana Kisia, karibu sana.
Thank you.
And what are just your opening remarks in regards to, the death of Bwana Raila Odinga?
First of all, let me associate with what the previous speakers have said, and at this stage to pass my sincere condolences on behalf of my family, who knew Raila very, very closely. Not just at public level, but at a very, very personal level. So may God rest his soul in peace. Condolences to Mama Ida, condolences to Rosie, my friend, Junior, and Winnie and the entire the Odinga family, and of course, all Kenyans who have known this man, this great man, to be their father, the father of the nation. It's sad that we've lost him. We all know that that is the route that we shall all follow. And as they say, from God we come, to God we shall return. That is the route, unfortunately, for all of us. So much as we want to accept the passing on of Mzee Jacob, it's painful, but such is life. I remember just 2 weeks ago, if I may indulge you, just 2 weeks ago, my son, who was very close to Raila, Ethan Kisia, the last time they sat, I think he was about 11 years old. He came to the house and they had a very good conversation. And 2 weeks ago, he told me something which really struck me 2 weeks ago. He asked me, Dad, Raila has fought this country. Raila has done so much. Raila has sacrificed. This man has suffered. Why haven't Kenyans given him his flowers? Why? I couldn't give him an answer. I don't know what I'll answer, whether I'll have an answer when he comes back from school today. So I just joined all the Kenyans in passing our sincere condolences to the family.
All right. And something that has been recurring when everyone speaks about Raila Odinga is that you cannot ignore him. And just first of all, before I get that, what you have on your screen is Raila's home in Opoda Farm, that is in Bondo, in the county of Siaya. Maybe we could just listen in for a bit to hear what the happening for just a bit, then we can come back to the conversation. All right, there we have something happening at Opoda Farm. Joe Ageo, maybe you could tell us what does that mean for the benefit, now that we are...
Yeah, so just a little bit of context. That is the Opoda Farm is really Raila's rural home.
Okay.
Has moved away from his father's Kamo Kajaramogi. I remember this took me back to 1994 when I was a university student and the father died, and we drove there in buses to go for that funeral. But basically what those people are saying, I mean, this is the bound to turn political at every turn. Basically, they're saying there's no Baba has ever killed. This is, I think, something that is reminiscent of the campaigns, should have been 2017. Kind of contrasting him with other politicians, that, you know, there are politicians who've been accused of killing this person and the other person, and so on. And so just saying, sort of like the way he used to say, Mweupe kama pamba, sort of saying this guy has not done those terrible things that other people have done. But I think that such a chant would come at this time is very telling in terms of the kind of conversations we might be having going forward. The last time I was at this home, by the way, was in December of 2018, and that time I was interviewing him on, you know, his reflections on the handshake, sort of these interviews we get around about the end of the year, because earlier in that year, I think it was 9th of March, they had done the handshake thing
Yes.
with Uhuru at the time. And so throughout the year there'd been debates, sort of like what you have with broad-based and all that. And so this is an interview we had there to kind of ask him questions about it. And it is interesting how philosophical he was around these things. He always, I mean, there would be a lot of criticism, but he was kind of very calm about it. He would say, oh, you know, it's about the country. We had deep and detailed conversations with my brother Uhuru Kenyatta, talked about the country and that sort of thing. And he earned some criticism for it. But I think there's a sense in which he would get to a point, like I said earlier, and he says, you know what, the country is actually very important. I can sacrifice this, I can shelve this ambition or political interest. And became a divisive figure in many respects to that extent, because then that would be received in different ways on either side of the political aisle. But that was him. I think there isn't a great politician who doesn't elicit those kinds of things. Wamalwa Kijana characterized it well, and he said that there's nobody who's neutral about Raila. It's Raila phobia and Raila mania. So you either love him too much or you hate him too much. Sometimes you don't even know why.
Yeah, I think the Raila's, I mean, history will be in many chapters. There's first the early 90s, you know, when the young man who's trying to sort of negotiate how, say, the opposition, if you like, will get power. And he starts this perhaps in 1992, and there's all these sparks. Then there's the Raila of the 2000s, you know, who then has become himself and, you know, uses all his mastery to sort of get a 202 moment, in many respects get the Kibaki government into office. And then there's Raila of 2010, who really has come into fruition, and he's not only a statesman, but a man who's expected to, you know, become president. And then doesn't happen in 2013. Goes into this period of almost annihilation. Remember when everyone was telling Raila in 2013 after elections to retire, you know, but please go home. And then he steps away for 8 months and goes out into the US. And then when he comes back, Baba while you're away, the 8 months the country was unable to move in 8 months without him. And then elicits this sort of new rebirth of his politics. That then sort of takes him to 2017. And then, of course, you have the Baba now of the handshakes now of 2018, and then most recent with President William Ruto. I suspect the bigger question that will be asked is where do we place, you know, the man, the legend at this moment? And I think it will be impossible, it will be a lie for anyone to say that the history of this country would have been written in any different if Raila had not walked into it. The way he characterized politics, the way he changed it, the way he managed to move people and move masses. And I mean, covering him and watching him when he gets into a crowd and gets into a moment, you get to see this man in a different ways and different paths, that every other politician might miss the moment, but not Raila. You know, he had this ability to capture the moment. And I think we've told these stories of how before 2002 they get into this platform with, you know, the entire Nako Rainbow Brigade. They'd all agreed to a candidate. And then he's said it, I think, that he looked at the crowd and read the moment, and then he said, Kibaki Tosha. And that was it.
Yeah, and I think Philip perhaps could tell us that. I mean, he was worked with him in many instances. There was this thing about the enigma, that's what it was called. And part of the reason why that happened is that he did the most unexpected of things, even politically, where he's contested an election. He says, the party says he has won, and his supporters believe it, and there is actually a lot of support he has in that direction. And then he wakes up and says, no, I'm actually going to work with my opponent for the sake of the country and everything. And that's surprised a lot of people. When people said one last bullet,
yes,
then he comes back and then he's running again and he becomes a formidable candidate. What was this about him that at every turn when people thought he was down and out, he emerges from another corner and you don't know how it happened, and suddenly
somehow there's
he's
another
out
bullet
of parliament, but he still has a grip on the party and the politics. What was that, as someone who interacted with him many times?
Well, I would want to agree with what James has said. That Raila knew how to connect. But not just to connect, he would connect even with a little child, a baby. He would have a conversation with the baby. He was able to connect with the youth, connect with women, and connect with people in his generation. He knew what to tell them. He knew what these people expected of him. So that ability to connect at all levels made him, created this politician that it will take a long, long time before we see somebody like the stature of Raila Odinga. And then as he has grown, remember he was also a youth, like what we have right now, the Gen Zs. But now he has grown over time. And with growth in age has come experience, has come more wisdom. I think that Raila, I can say, is a man who was full of wisdom. I remember in 2007, because I was in charge of KICC, and that was a command center. And for close to, I think, 3 or so months, I worked so closely with the late Kivuitu, very, very closely. And, to the run-up of elections of 2007, at some point, there was a lot of pressure from the establishment. People really wanted to manage Kivuitu. But because I was in charge of KICC, where, the things were happening, the tallying center, the operations, I had the privilege of interacting with Kivuitu from morning to late evening. And I think I was the one who was managing him to some extent. Okay? If there's one election that I believe Raila won, flat out, is 2007. Okay? In fact, I can now reveal that the portrait that was done, President-elect, I think it was between me and Ayub Savla. I gave Savla some money to go and print this portrait of President-elect, because it was so evident, even from the chairman of the Electoral Commission, that Raila indeed had won. But from nowhere, I'm telling you, absolute, from nowhere, somebody else was declared the winner, okay? And of course, chaos erupted. And this country was almost brought down to its knees, okay? I'm sure that time you're not in NTV, but Joe and probably James Smart had just begun their career, So that is the time you would have expected that this country was, going to be turned into another banana republic, maybe something worse than Somalia, okay? But it took Raila Odinga, it took his wisdom, patience, to extend a handshake with the then President Kibaki. You can imagine how painful it is. You have gone through a very grueling campaign period. And campaigns in Kenya, take a lot of energy. They take, the amount of energy that you put in terms of minutes, or in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of manpower. You can't believe it. It goes into billions of shillings if you were to convert all those resources into money. But it had to take someone like Raila to say, you know what? This country is greater than Raila Odinga. And although I know that I've won these elections, I'm ready to play a second fiddle for the sake of this country, for the sake of future generations. Let me tell you this, and this is what I can now reveal. Okay? At some point, I was small fish. Just left private sector and joined government. I was small fish. At least I imagine I was small fish. But how people from government, the people who actually had power in government, several of them called me. In fact, Mutua is one of them, because he's on record. I can now quote him. Mutua called, yes, Karen Mutua called me, and they said, you know what? We know you are the one who is managing the chairman of the Electoral Commission. I said, I'm only hosting him. I'm not managing him. How can I manage a chairman of an electoral body? How can I manage a Mzee that is much older than me? But I got calls from very senior and powerful officials. And one of them actually threatened me, said, you know what, Philip, we want you to ask the chairman of the Electoral Commission to announce Mwai Kibaki as a winner. And I said, why do I get those powers from? Where? And the guy mentioned a few names who are seated around the late Mwai Kibaki, my president. I think that's the only president I personally have had since I was born 6 decades ago. I don't know that I can call the others president, but anyway, they occupied an office. So these fellows called me and issued threats and said, if you don't, if you are not able to convince Nelly Kivuitu to make that announcement, just know that we're in government. And I was given the names of people who are around government. But what really disturbed me is that the belief that a junior state officer can actually manipulate a whole chairman of an electoral body, okay? Later on, just before 6 o'clock, okay, another call came in, and because Kivuitu had put off his phone, they actually spoke to Kivuitu from my line. Okay, they spoke to him, and whatever they told him, a few minutes later, because I'm the one who took Kivuitu from where he was and secured Kivuitu at the VIP lounge on first floor at KSCC. Okay, so when now, so the old man just walking with a file around the room, and he eventually asked me, young man, wapi omeza nataka kutangaza. At that point, I didn't know what Kivuitu was going to announce. But anyway, he eventually announced what the majority of the commissioners had decided, that Mwai Kibaki had. My point being, even the state machinery had actually admitted, maybe not publicly, but they knew that Raila had won, that the only way they could stop him is through Kivuitu. And for Raila, several months or several weeks down the line to say, you know what, I will do this, not because of Raila Odinga, but I'll do it for the sake of this country. This is the man that we're going to take decades, if not a century, to replace.
The people's president,
yes,
he crowned himself at some point. I think those are, if you look at the pictures
yes,
that are coming out, earlier on, and also of different places in Kisumu, Opodo Farm, file footage of Raila in political rallies. I think the general consensus, as Philip said, and as what we've been discussing throughout the day, is you have a man here who dictated Kenyan politics in a way that no one else before has done, and no one else that currently we think has the ability to, and in this sort of traits that he had, to connect with people in different levels, ability to convince the public, about his stature, his goodwill, and his messaging. I remember they came up with the idea of social democrats around 2007. Such a very new concept, because it's the first time the Kenyan politics trying to get this ideological underpinning. Are you on the left? Are you on the right? And he was being pushed, because I think his political opponents at that time had suggested that he was a communist, or something as worse as that. And I think he comes about and he says, you know what, a social democrat. And then he takes this moment to explain, Joe, what that means.
Yes, I mean, he was very big at that. And now there is, I think Francis Atwoli, again, one person who worked with him very closely, says the passing of Raila Odinga at a time when Kenya was yearning for unity is a big blow to our country. Raila has always been the glue that held our country together during moments of political misunderstanding. He consistently rose above divisions to unite us as Kenyans. He's a man who Kenyans will remember for now and years to come. Indeed, many of our current leaders, including President William Ruto, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi, and several members of cabinet are in many ways Raila's political students, shaped by his mentorship and influence. Then he said that having been very close to Raila Odinga and being the last person he served in his office before leaving for India for treatment, I will forever cherish his trust in me and his unwavering commitment to Kenyan workers. And then he says, Pole to my sister Ida Odinga and the entire family. So lots of condolences they are coming, Dan, as you mentioned, for a man that will have a very rich history as people remember the things that he did, the things that he said, There's one more here. So Isaac Kalua was the chairman of the Kenya Water Towers when Raila Odinga was prime minister, and that is the time when there was a big fight about the Mau. And so he says that Kenyans mourn a true patriot, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, who dedicated his life to justice, democracy, and the preservation of our nation's soul. He stood firm when it mattered the most, including when he championed the restoration of the Mau Forest, aggressive water tower, knowing it could cost him politically. That decision reflected uncommon courage and foresight. So this is something reflecting on Raila's legacy on environmental issues. Remember, this is something that he had said actually at the time, that he was ready to lose his political support, and many people would say he actually did, because of what he did in the Mau Forest, and to a large extent the 2013 election reflected that disenchantment that came with the evictions that happened as a way of preserving the Mau. So Isaac Kalua, they are talking about it with that perspective.
We also have James Olekiapi, Professor James Olekiapi. He was a presidential candidate in 2013, and he has said that the breaking news of the demise of the former Prime Minister, Honorable Raila Odinga, is profoundly shocking. Whatever we may say of the man, he contributed immensely to the life and democratization of Kenya and significantly influenced political, constitutional, and legal reforms in the country. A renowned Pan-Africanist. That's from Professor James Olekiapi. And just as an update, President William Ruto has convened an extraordinary meeting of the National Security Council at 10 a.m. That's when it was meant to be starting. And will later chair a special cabinet meeting at 2:30 p.m. So that is a message from the House on the Hill, that President William Ruto has convened an extraordinary meeting of the National Security Council at 10 a.m. and will later chair a special cabinet meeting at 2 p.m. So we wait to see whether that is, in between that, he's going to make the announcement formally to the public before he has the cabinet meeting, and we shall be monitoring that.
The National Assembly also adjourned.
Has also adjourned.
Yeah, has adjourned.
Morning sittings.
Yes.
And Speaker Wetangula, who appeared shaken at the time, invoked his authority understanding order number 1 to hold House proceedings and directed members of Parliament to reconvene later in the day. So he said that they're going to reconvene at 2:30, where he will give what he's calling an important communication from the chair. So that also just underscoring really how significant this is, that actually Parliament has adjourned the sittings for the morning, I guess pending what will come from that meeting at State House.
Yes, and something that keeps coming up, if you look at the different people, actually let me first read Boniface Mwangi's message, and he's posted on his social media platform. Then Boniface Mwangi is currently a presidential aspirant, and he was working with Raila Odinga during the last election under the Azimio coalition. And he says, "My condolences to the Raila Odinga family. Mzee amepumzika. His watch is over. What gives me hope is that last year a generation that will liberate Kenya from the shackles of bad leadership and corruption was born. Viva the revolution, viva." And that is Boniface Mwangi, as he condoles with the family of Raila Odinga. And we now want to cross over to Laban Shaban, who is in Nairobi. I believe he's in Kibra. Or he's on Ngong Road, I should say, where we, and the thing is that we've got a number of people who've left Kibra and are heading towards Raila Odinga's Nairobi home. But Laban Shaban is on the ground and he should have better details. Shaban, maybe what can you tell us? What is happening there?
Asante sana Dan, Smart na Joe, kwamba picha ambazo unaziona moja kwa moja hapa, hii ni barabara ya Ngong, ama ukipenda Ngong Road. Nimeandamana na wakazi hawa wa kaunti ndogo ya Kibra, ama eneo bunge la Kibra hapa jijini Nairobi, kutoka eneo la Kibra kwenyewe, maeneo ya Olympic. Wanafuatana hapa wakibeba majani barabarani, wakiimba, wakiomboleza kusema bila Raila sisi tutabaki na nani. Sasa hivi wanavyozungumza wanasema wanaelekea hadi nyumbani kwake Karen hapa jijini Nairobi, wakishindwa waseme nini. Taarifa ambayo baadhi ambao nimezungumza nao wanashindwa waeleze ni nini hasa kimetendeka, na nataka nikupe muktadha muhimu sana kwa nini tuko hapa katika eneo la Kibra, ama kwa nini tumeandamana na wakazi hawa wa Kibra katika eneo hili. Kibra ni eneo ambalo lilimegwa kutoka kwa eneo bunge la Lang'ata, eneo hilo ambapo Raila Odinga amekuwa mbunge kwa miaka 20 kuanzia mwaka 1992. Raila Odinga amekuwa mbunge wa Lang'ata mwaka 1997, mwaka wa 2002 na kuelekea hadi mwaka wa 2013 ambapo tume ya uchaguzi na mipaka IEBC ilifanya uratibu wa mipaka na kumega eneo hili la Kibra kutoka Lang'ata. Na ndio maana tuko hapa tuweze kusikia hisia za wakazi hawa kuhusu kifo cha Raila Odinga. Dan.
Sana Laban Shaban kwa kupatia ujumbe huo, and we shall be monitoring what happens in Nairobi, in Bondo, and across the country. We've seen there's activity as well in Kisumu, and we are going to be seeing different reactions from different parts of the country and different leaders, and we shall also be having the voice of, we've already received a video message which shall be giving from the deputy party leader of the ODM party, that is Abdul Samad Sharif Nasir, who is in South Africa, but NTV's Zainab Ismail is there and has already had a chance to speak to him, as well as Professor Kivuda Kibwana, who is one of the people who has been, you should say, in the trenches with Raila. So he's a man who definitely has some good sense of the man that Raila is, especially in these political spaces where you find people moving, today we're together, tomorrow we are not. But ultimately, if you listen to a lot of what is being said, there was a sense of division that, you know, Raila would bring, because people would feel Raila is not leading us this way, or he's doing something selfishly. But there are those who would feel, no, whatever Raila says is the law, you know. But somehow some will still come back and say, you know what, all said and done, you know. He's a person who we cannot overlook or you know, or dismiss when we talk about the development of the country. And like I said, we have a soundbite from Abdul Samad Sharif Nasir, that's the deputy party leader of ODM. Let's listen to what he has to say about this matter.
First of all, this is a sad moment for all of us. Just yesterday, before I traveled, I had some work, some donors in South Africa. And just before I traveled, I had a word with him. We were just discussing generally about a number of things, and he was in very high spirits, extremely high spirits. Before that, I talked to him, I think it was just after the trip that we had gone to Kasipul and Magarini. And I was actually telling him that he should just let us be the ones to take charge of those by-elections. And he called me yesterday to actually tell me that there's a group of doctors who wish to be able to invest in Mombasa. And I told him I'm traveling to South Africa. I'll be back in 2 days.
Must be incredibly difficult for Swamad, and we pray for blessings and comfort for him, as well as everyone else who is directly and personally affected by the death of Raila Odinga. He has been, like has been said, a mentor to many. He's been a leader, guiding lights to many people. And so we condole with him, as well as, you know, as we hope for, you know, a comforting time despite the turmoil that may be ongoing. And we shall be getting more updates from different people who are giving their messages or sharing their messages of condolence from different parts of the country and of the world. And we also do have, rather, Abdul Samad is in Johannesburg in South Africa. That is where he was speaking from. And you could see how difficult it is.
That's very difficult to watch,
yes.
Dan. But just speaking to what I think we've passed on in the morning, that Raila wasn't just this sort of huge figure, party leader, you know, politician. He was also very personal. And I think you could just tell from Abdul Samad the kind of personal relationship he had with the man went beyond him being a party leader. And it goes to show that how difficult this moment that we're experiencing is going to be. Yes, we're seeing now people on the streets. That is one way of the morning, but we haven't seen yet the kind of how far this man traveled in terms of personal relationships. And I think that is where really the story is, that he wasn't just your typical politician. He was those things. He was a former prime minister, yes, former member of parliament, ODM leader, father, all those things, but also he was a very caring man that cared about his personal relationships, as Philip has just said about, you know, him and his son. And everyone who's met him would tell you almost a personal story, a connecting story of, you know, because he cared. He really cared. That was not a ploy, wasn't a small screen. He just was that man, a very caring man.
And speaking about the Paul, who was, you know, he worked closely with Jimmy Wanjigi, who was close to Raila Odinga, and I mean, they may have had their, you know...
It was his campaign manager in 2017?
2017,
yes, exactly.
And they've had dealings,
yes,
you know, before that. He did the manifesto for the 2017 elections and, you know, ran his campaign.
Yes, and he's posted his message of condolence saying, "I am deeply heartbroken by the passing of my dear friend and brother, Right Honorable Raila Odinga. We shared countless moments of courage, conviction, and unyielding hope for a better Kenya, moments that defined not just our friendship, but an era of struggle for freedom and justice. Raila was more than a leader. He was the spirit of our nation's second liberation, a man whose love for Kenya burned brighter than fear. Raila was a true statesman, a patriot who devoted his life to the pursuit of justice and democracy. His voice and vision shaped our nation's history, and his legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. As we mourn his loss, we must also celebrate the greatness of his journey, a life lived in service, sacrifice, and steadfast belief in the power of the people. My heartfelt condolences go to Mama Ida, his children, and the entire Odinga family, and that is Jimmy Wanjigi, who is a man who was close to Raila Odinga, and who also vied for presidency in he didn't vie, rather. He was an aspirant, yes, but did not get his name on the ballot. He didn't make it in the last hurdle.
Yeah, he was locked out.
Yeah, yes.
There is also the president of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema. He says, saddened to hear of the passing of former PM Raila Odinga. We extend our deepest condolences to the people of Kenya, the Odinga family, President William Ruto, and all those touched by his towering advocate for democracy. His legacy will endure. May he rest in eternal peace. That is the Zambian president, Hakainde Hichilema, posting that on X a few moments ago.
All right, and just before we get a few more comments, let's cross over back to Raila's home in Bondo in the county of Siaya, where Ibrahim Karanja is. And Ibra, we could see a lot of activity happening there as the people in Siaya, in Bondo, mourn Raila Odinga. What can you tell us? Ibrahim, if you can hear me. Okay, I think we shall try and get a hold of Ibrahim as we proceed with this broadcast. But we shall, as we also monitor the other parts of the country. And Bwana Kisia, we see a lot of people talking about how great and, as Joe said, enigmatic Raila Odinga was. Could we say that Raila Odinga is the biggest name in Kenya's political history?
Oh, yes. I mean, nothing far from the truth. He is the embodiment of courage, hope, resilience, and the father of democracy in the Republic of Kenya. I mean, you can imagine how Kenya would look like without Raila Odinga. Just
I think
imagine.
It's even hard to imagine.
I mean, just imagine how it would have looked like. Just go back from Mzee Arap Moi and how he ruled this country and how Raila was able to intervene, you know, to ensure that there are certain limits that were not crossed. Look at when, of course, when Kibaki took over, at least that is the only time that we can say we had some semblance of democracy. We had some semblance of hope. For the first time, this country drew a vision for this country. This country has been operating without a vision. I mean, and it's because of the two gentlemen, Emeritus Mwai Kibaki and Honorable Raila Odinga, who came together, formed a government, and for the first time, my brother, for the first time, and we had been independent for so many years, for the first time we had a vision. You can imagine we had two presidents before Mwai Kibaki running this country without a vision, without a shared vision. Now, my brother, I hear about His Excellency the President, and I'm sorry to make reference to the current sitting president, but he is talking about his vision, that he has a vision 2055. He's talking about his vision. Look at the world of difference. Raila and Kibaki came together, crafted a shared vision, for the Republic of Kenya. That vision, 2030, belongs to the people of Kenya. The only difference is that, these two gentlemen were on the driver's seat, driving the vision. Now, look at the replacement. We have a replacement which is telling us that they have a vision for this country. It is not shared. We don't know where it's coming from. So I can tell you, without Raila being there, this country would have been ruled, especially past Mwai Kibaki, because we had Kenyatta too, who came. I mean, he did whatever he did, but he had certain excesses. We know what happened in terms of democratic space. They tried to muzzle out democratic space. We actually know what happened. It's not the time to talk about it, but we even know what has happened currently with this current administration. I mean, the extrajudicial killings that have happened. You can imagine if Raila wasn't there. Just try and imagine if Raila wasn't there to stop these excesses and to face this gentleman in the eye and tell him, you know what, you have crossed the red line, okay, and I'm ready to die for this country, okay? So you can imagine without Raila being there, you can imagine what these characters would have done. Just try and imagine that Raila wasn't there. You can imagine if Raila wasn't there during the Gen Z protests in 2024. I can tell you, I had a moment with Raila, when Raila had a handshake with President Uhuru Kenyatta. And he explained to me why it was necessary to have that conversation. He explained to me why it was necessary to have that handshake. And I could see how genuine the man was. You know, he didn't do it because of personal interest. And that is why people mistake. And those of us who had a very close conversation, discussion around that matter, understand why Raila had to do what he did at that time. The only thing that I can say...
Let me just hold you there for a bit so you can come and say it, because we don't want to lose that signal from Siaya, because it may be a bit shaky. So let's cross over to Ibrahim Karanja. Ibra, if you can hear me, what's the sense of what's happening there?
Well, Dan, I am at Raila Odinga's Opoda Farm home. This is in Bondo, Siaya County, and I've been here for the past about 30 minutes. Earlier on, I was in Bondo town, where that was upon the news of the passing on of Raila Odinga broke out. And Bondo town immediately came to a standstill. Businesses at that particular point were closed. Everyone, almost everyone, came out of their homes and they made a long walk. I would approximate more than 5 kilometers of a walk from Bondo town to Raila's Opoda Farm home. And as we speak, there are thousands upon thousands of mourners and residents and neighbors and friends who are all here chanting the Luo songs, of course, in mourning Raila Odinga. I was able to speak to some of them earlier on, and they said that this is such a huge loss to the area. Remember, Bondo is where Raila Odinga's home is. This is where he identifies with as his home area. And immediately we got here, Dan, part of the things we did was, one, to establish whether there were any family members or neighbors or people who could speak to us about this particular news that is breaking out this morning. And yes, we found people in the house. though they declined from speaking. They said up until the family spokesperson, that is Siaya Senator Dr. Oburu Oginga, speaks, that is when they will also be able to speak and pass their condolences. But what they have told us, even without mentioning the source of this particular information, is that indeed it is true that Raila Amolo Odinga passed on this morning in India. They have also confirmed that by the time of his passing on, some of his family members were in India with him. They include his daughter, Iyala, Member of Parliament, Winnie Odinga, as well as Kisumu woman representative, Ruth Odinga, who are with Raila Odinga, who are with Raila Odinga by the time he was passing on in India. So that is what we can confirm right now, that indeed family members of Raila Odinga were with him by the time of his passing on early this morning. I repeat, his daughter, Winnie Odinga, the Member of Parliament for the East Africa Legislative Assembly, as well as Raila Odinga's sister, Ruth Odinga, the Kisumu County woman representative, are in India as we speak. And that is credible information that we have received from Raila Odinga's Opoda farm home here in Bondo. There are a couple of leaders here who have already arrived. Leaders who we may not be able to speak to, of course, because due to that reason they gave that up until Dr. Oburu Oginga speaks. But a host of members of the county assembly are here at his Opoda farm. And like I said, thousands upon thousands of residents who came here to mourn Raila Amolo Odinga. Dan, Raila Odinga, they say, is an enigma. This is a man whose name will always be written throughout his 80 years of life. His name will have a chapter when the book about the Republic of Kenya is written about. They say he is the father of democracy. This is a man who always commanded admiration and always criticism in equal measure. This is a man who made 5 stabs at the presidency, trying the country's topmost job with promises upon promises of revolutionizing the country. And in each and every election in which Raila Amolo Odinga took part in, he was always so close to the finish line, always so close to being declared President of the Republic of Kenya. That is only aside from the 1997 election, which he vied and was not among the top 2. But look at 2007, look at 2013, 2017, and even the latest contest in 2022, the latest presidential contest. But many will also remember him for the contest that he put within or throughout the African continent. Remember his bid for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission, where he went round the entire continent to popularize his candidature, which was Kenya's candidature, of course, with the support of President William Ruto. Even though he did not win that particular contest early this year, around February, Raila Odinga then made a name for himself as this statesman who had a bigger picture also for the continent. And I remember, Dan, I was privileged and honored to have conducted his very last media interview around July of this particular year, where he spoke about his journey, spoke about that AUC contest, and spoke about his latest political move, which was deciding to work with President William Ruto under the broad-based government arrangement, saying there comes a time when country is bigger, and saying that his decision to work with President William Ruto was just so to ensure that the country does not go down the drain, that all these were decisions made because of the country, putting country first. But beyond that, beyond what people will speak about Raila Odinga in the political circles, there are stories which friends will tell, there are stories which family members will tell. He is a father who has his biological children as well as many other Kenyans who looked up to him as a father in various ways. There were also his political children, many of whom have already sent their condolences messages to the family and friends of Raila Amolo Odinga. And this is a man amongst the very few men who had the political strength to, even at one particular point, resign from Parliament to seek a fresh mandate upon changing his political stand and his political party. This is a character, this is a man who will always be admired, who will always be mentioned in the talk about Kenya's democracy. And as we speak, we would be speaking to the people here in Siaya to know when is the last time they got to interact with Raila Amolo Odinga. Where was it? What did they tell him? For instance, Dan, it is also important to mention that our presence in Siaya County today was a presence because of the Siaya Investments and Trade Conference that was to start today in Siaya, a conference in which initially Raila Odinga was set to address. But on the day that it was scheduled to start is the very day that news about the passing on of Raila Odinga has also broken out. And as we speak, that particular conference has been left in disarray. We've spoken to some of the people there. They say it is important to continue with the conference in honor of Raila Amolo Odinga because this is what he would have wanted. Of course, there are other quarters who feel it is time to wrap up the conference perhaps and not have it anymore. And that is something we shall be keeping an eye on to see how it develops. However, that is one of the many milestones that the people here are attributing to the late Raila Amolo Odinga. Beyond his years in parliament, beyond the time he served in the cabinet, even rising to the most highest position, which is the prime minister position in the Republic of Kenya, of course, under the grand coalition government between President Mwai Kibaki and himself, Raila Amolo Odinga. They called it the Nusu Mkate government. And it's also important to speak about Raila Odinga's journey in political parties. Remember, it is around this time, in October actually, last week, when his own party, the party he led for 20 years, the ODM party, was to mark 20 years of its existence since the year 2005. You'd all remember that 2005 referendum where Raila and the team then opposed the plebiscite, voting no, of course, and the other team led by President Mwai Kibaki, the late, voting yes. And that is where the Orange Democratic Movement was born. And a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, especially last week, the ODM party had scheduled to hold its 20th anniversary, a celebration that was to be held in Mombasa County. But up until the last minute, these particular celebrations were postponed, and they postponed it for about 1 month. And it was around that time when news broke out that Raila Odinga was unwell. So, of course, the ODM party is also one of the places or one of the institutions we will have to be looking at to see how they remember their party leader, even as they plan their next steps forward. But Dan, as I mentioned earlier, there is an entire team on this Nyanza region. We have, of course, our colleagues in Kisumu. We have other colleagues in Siaya. I am here in Bondo, like I said. Bondo is where, this is a spiritual home, I should say, of Raila Amolo Odinga. It is here where he went to Maranda, both in primary and in secondary school. It is here where his father, the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, is buried not too far from the Zopoda home. This is where also not too far from here where the residence of his elder brother, Siaya Senator Dr. Oburu Oginga, is. So lots of activities will be happening from here. So far, we have not seen the National Government Administrative Officers here yet, but we certainly know this is a place they will be having or taking keen interests in. One, for security. Two, to ensure that there is order, even as thousands upon thousands of mourners come to this particular home, all of whom are mourning in their own different way. Of course, at this particular time, when the news is still fresh, when even the family has not yet spoken about it, everyone is mourning in their own way. Like I said earlier, there were road closures throughout Bondo, even as more groups are still walking to his Opoda farm home.
All right.
The town in itself is now stopping. Nothing is continuing in terms of businesses, in terms of the usual operations, as these people have lost one of their own. They have lost a leader whom they identify as the leader of the region. In fact, some of them, while mourning him, said, we have now lost, or saying the community, the Luo community has lost. But this is beyond the Luo community, Dan. This is about the country. This is about a man who was able to command admiration and respect across the 47 counties. I mean, look at how the rest of the country would vote for him any other time he wanted to be president. So it goes beyond Bondo, it goes beyond Siaya County, and it goes beyond Nyanza. This is about the country, it's about the continent, it's about a legend. This is about Raila Amolo Odinga, Dan. Even as I bring it back to you in studio, later we will be speaking to more friends and family to just get to know, of course, especially after the confirmation of the passing on that will be coming perhaps from the family leader, Dr. Oburu Oginga, the Siaya Senator, and perhaps also from President William Ruto later in the day. Dan.
All right, thank you very much, Ibrahim, for that comprehensive live link, and also preempting a question I was going to ask him about what the things he spoke about during his interview.
The July interview.
Yes.
I think Ibrahim Karanja could easily be the last person who had a proper sit-down interview with Raila Odinga. It was actually very interesting because that was the first time, I think, when he tried to explain exactly what this broad-based thing was about, why he was going into it. Remember, he had been criticized, and I think that criticism didn't go away that much, that he had hijacked what the Gen Z had started. And I think this was a period around Sabasaba, and this was still bubbling under the surface. And so he came to try and diffuse that. And one of the things some of his closest aides would say is that he was greatly distressed by the amount of criticism on social media. We call it trolling, how he would be trolled by people who he believed misunderstood him. I mean, and that was partly because historically, a lot of people of a certain generation kind of revered him for the role that he played in the so-called second liberation. And so he was not very used to large numbers of people coming at him. And this was happening on social media, and some of the people close to him said that this greatly distressed him. I have also seen that the African Union has issued a statement by the chairman of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf. Remember, this is the man that he was running against in the very controversial AUC race, saying the chairperson of the African Union Commission, AUC, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, has learned with profound sadness of the passing of His Excellency Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, and a distinguished statesman on the African continent. On behalf of the African Union, its organs and institutions, the chairperson extends his deepest condolences to the Odinga family, the government and people of Kenya, and to the entire African family mourning this immense loss. His Excellency Raila Odinga was a towering figure in Kenya's political life and a steadfast champion of democracy, good governance, and people-centered development. His decades-long commitment to justice, pluralism, and democratic reform left an indelible mark not only on Kenya, but across the African continent. He says Mr. Odinga's contributions extended far beyond national borders, recalling when he was the African Union High Representative for Infrastructure Development in Africa, where he says he worked tirelessly to advance the continent's integration and connectivity agenda. The chairperson also said Africa has lost one of its most visionary sons, a leader who dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice, democracy, and unity, and saying that the African Union joins the government and the people of Kenya and the entire continent in celebrating the life, service, and enduring legacy of Raila Amolo Odinga. That's a statement there from the African Union, signed by Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, the AUC chairperson.
Yes, and we also have condolence message from Charity Kalukingilu, who is a lady who has worked with Raila for many years in the political space.
She was in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Just a reminder.
She was in the Pentagon. Yes, we shall be monitoring what the Pentagon guys say as well. And she says, I am shocked and saddened by the sudden and untimely death of former PM Raila Amolo Odinga. We have lost a tower of democracy and a fighter for human rights and good governance. His leadership was all about how to make our country better for all. My sincere condolence to Mama Ida and the entire Jaramogi family. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Go well, my friend. We also have Aisha Jumwa, who is currently the chairperson of Kenya Roads Board, but has been a member of ODM party, and she was a point person, especially in Kilifi County, where she hails from. And she says, my Baba, my political mentor, I will miss you forever. Rest in paradise. Kenya Roads Board chairperson Aisha Jumwa. And speaking of the coast, and you know the coast is has historically been known to be an ODM zone. Let's cross over to Mombasa, where Kevin Mutai is standing by to get some of the messages and sentiments of the people in Mombasa regarding the death of Raila Amolo Odinga. Kevin, if you can hear me, over to you.
Well, I can clearly hear Dan, and indeed it's been a very sad day, not only for the Mombasa people, but the entire country, following the passing on of ODM party leader Raila Odinga. Here we are in Bangladesh, where he's enjoyed, or rather, one of his political strongholds in the county of Mombasa. And remember that Odinga has really played a critical role in the politics of this region, considering that the people of Mombasa has also forwarded, key political figures such as the Cabinet Secretary Hassan Joho, who is a close ally of Raila Odinga. And this is one of the many places in the region where people have been supporting Odinga. They've been out in the streets from as early as 10 a.m. as soon as they got the news that the party leader Raila Odinga has passed on. They have been in large numbers, but Dan, what you can see is that they're getting a bit emotional, and just a few minutes from here they were on the road, but unfortunately I believe one of them has been knocked down by a vehicle, so quite a number of them have left this particular place to go to that particular area where the accident just occurred. But let me just quickly get to listen to a few of them, get their views about and their reflection about the passing on of ODM leader Raila Odinga. Nikianza nawe kabisa, naomba usogea hapa karibu. Naomba usogea hapa. Ukianza kwa majina unaitwa nani?
Hey! Jameni.
Unaitwa nani ukianza kwa majina?
Tutetea jameni. Sasa tumekwama jameni. Baba tutauza wapi baba? Baba ushuru itatuua. Baba
we have lost sound from Mombasa, but we shall definitely be following that up just to get the sense of what's happening. But you can already feel the weight of grief that has struck at least the lady who was speaking and other people. We have various people who've shared their condolence messages on social media, some of which we have already sampled, and we shall look at others. For instance, we have Narendra Modi, that is the who leads India, where Raila Odinga, yes, has passed away. He says he's deeply saddened by the passing of his dear friend and former Prime Minister of Kenya, Mr. Raila Odinga. He was a towering statesman and a cherished friend of India. I had the privilege of knowing him closely since my days as Chief Minister of Gujarat, and our association continued over the years. He had a special affection for India, our culture, values, and ancient wisdom. This was reflected in his efforts to strengthen India-Kenya ties. He particularly admired Ayurveda and traditional medicine systems of India, having witnessed their positive impact on his daughter's health. I extend my deepest condolences to his family, friends, and to the people of Kenya in this hour of grief. That's Narendra Modi. We also have, I think we have a few more post we can look at?
There's one here from the CJ.
Yes.
Martha Kome. She says, I've received with profound sorrow and deep sadness the news of the passing of the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya. Says, on behalf of the Judiciary of Kenya, the Judicial Service Commission, and on my own behalf, I extend our heartfelt condolences to Mama Ida Odinga, the Odinga family, and to the people of the Republic of Kenya. We share in your grief and join the nation in mourning the loss of one of Kenya's most enigmatic and consequential leaders. Kenya has lost a statesman whose name is forever etched in the annals of our democratic journey, a towering figure who stood at the confluence of history and destiny, and who, through courage, sacrifice, and conviction, held together the fragile threads of our nation's democracy. And then she says, throughout his illustrious life of public service, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga embodied the spirit of resilience and the audacity of hope. His unyielding struggle for political freedom, constitutional reform, and justice transformed Kenya's political landscape, expanded the frontiers of democratic participation, and anchored the principles of equality and accountability that today underpin our governance. And then she continues to say, he was a patriot whose love for Kenya transcended politics, a leader celebrated both at home and abroad for his vision, eloquence, and steadfast pursuit of social justice. His unwavering support for the women's movement marked him as a true believer in inclusive leadership. He consistently championed the recognition of women as equal partners in shaping Kenya's political destiny, and then says that as a nation, we celebrate his enduring legacy of courage in adversity, dialogue over division, and hope over despair. His life's work calls upon every Kenyan to remain vigilant in defending the freedoms for which he so tirelessly fought, and to continue building a nation founded on unity, justice, equality, and dignity for all, saying may his family and all Kenyans find comfort in the knowledge that his life's mission was not in vain. His dream of a just, free, and united Kenya will continue to guide generations to come. And then she concludes, may his soul rest in eternal peace. That's a statement coming from the Honorable Justice Martha Koome, Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court, and also Chairperson of the Judicial Service Commission.
All right, I have one here from Martha Karua. She says, to Mama Ida Odinga and family, my dear sister Ida Odinga, it is with deep shock and profound sadness that I received the news of the passing of your dear husband, father, friend, and great leader, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. Please accept my heartfelt condolences and those of many who stand with you, your family, the people of Kenya, our continent of Africa, and indeed humanity at large. Raila's illustrious career spanning decades towers like a colossus across Kenya and the African continent. His life was a testament to courage, endurance, and unwavering commitment to the liberation of transformation of our nation. Few lives have been so fully devoted to the cause of justice and democracy. He bore immense personal sacrifice, spending years behind bars and away from his loved ones in pursuit of freedom for all Kenyans. That was his burden to carry, but with it came yours, Ida, and that of your entire family. The weight you have carried as his partner in both life and struggle is beyond what most can imagine. And for that, Kenya owes you and your family an unpayable debt of gratitude. I'll remember Raila as a fearless defender of the people, a voice for the voiceless, and a steadfast comrade in the fight for the second liberation. For over 3 decades, I had the honor of working alongside him, sometimes as an ally, sometimes an opponent, but always united by a shared vision of a freer, fairer Kenya. The nation and the world have lost a monumental figure and one of Africa's most consequential sons. May the Almighty God grant you and your family strength, peace, and comfort in this hour of grief, and may He grant our brother eternal rest. Rest in peace, Jacom. Rest in peace, Kinara Wangu. With deepest sympathy, Martha Karua.
Well, thanks, Matt, for that. And we have a few more. We had already seen C.S. Mbadi, and we were saying that, you know, he's shared his sentiments before the president's formal announcement. I don't know that that's in proper protocol, but he's not alone.
Experts. So they just
they've reverted.
But their allegiance still.
They're on loan.
I guess, I mean, I think the consideration was more probably on the party side than government protocol.
Yeah, I also see
that's an interesting one.
Lee Kinyanjui has also issued a statement. He says, I did not know Raila as a friend for a long time. For years, he was on the other side, and our paths rarely crossed until the last election. Then came a call from former President Uhuru Kenyatta informing me that a friend was visiting Nakuru and should be received with the full honor and protocol of a state guest. That moment marked the beginning of a meaningful journey, one where we bonded and shared deep reflections about our country and the future that the next generation deserves. Raila was a pragmatic and dedicated statesman who always saw the best in Kenya. In his final chapter, he devoted himself selflessly to healing the political wounds that have long divided us, and in many ways, he succeeded. Jacom, we salute your courage, conviction, and unwavering commitment to a better Kenya. And that is Lee Kinyanjui, who is currently the Cabinet Secretary in charge of industrialization and trade. And we also have one from Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu, who says, nimepokea kwa masikitiko makubwa taarifa ya kifo cha Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga. Tumempoteza kiongozi mahiri, mwanamajumui wa Afrika, mpenda amani na mtafuta suluhu, ambaye ushawishi na upendo wake haukuwa tu ndani ya Kenya, bali Afrika Mashariki na Afrika kwa ujumla. Msiba huu si wa Kenya pekee, bali wetu sote. Kwa niaba ya serikali na wananchi wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, ninatuma salamu za pole kwa Rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, Mheshimiwa Daktari William Samoei Ruto, Mama Ida Odinga, watoto, familia, ndugu, jamaa, marafiki na wananchi wote wa Kenya kwa msiba huu. Tunaungana kuwaombea kwa Mwenyezi Mungu awajalie subra, faraja na imani katika kipindi hiki, na ilaze roho ya mpendwa wetu Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga mahali pema peponi. Amina. That is Samia Suluhu, who is the president of Tanzania. And speaking again to him being statesman, not just a statesman, but is there anything like a continentsman? You know,
Pan-Africanist is
Pan-Africanist is the word.
Yes.
Yeah, I think just like you've read messages of condolences from people across the continent, I have received a number of them, but allow me just to reference on two. One from David Nyakorach Masanga, who was his ardent supporter, and he actually campaigned for Raila in 2022, and has been steadfast in supporting Raila Odinga. And you know, he's a Pan-Africanist, and they also campaigned for Raila as a bid for AU chairmanship. Another message of condolence is from a friend of mine, James Chikaonda from Malawi, and he says, Raila was Kenya politics. My heartfelt condolences to his family, and may his beautiful, beautiful soul rest in perfect peace. So Raila was not just is somebody who went beyond our borders. He's somebody who was recognized as a state person, as a statesman beyond our boundaries. And Raila touched many souls. Raila had an impact, and is somebody who will be missed by so many. But having said that, I would want to say this. And Kenyans need to appreciate this. I think, Joe, God loves Kenya. If you didn't believe there's God, I think you need to think twice. God loves this country. You can just try again and imagine. I said, imagine what happened, his interventions during Moi, during Kibaki, and so on and so forth. And then Kenyatta. And you can imagine how this country would have been if there was no handshake between President Ruto and Raila Odinga. Just try and figure out, try and imagine how chaotic this country would have been. So I think there was a reason, even if we don't agree, like, I mean, I didn't have a chance for Raila to explain to me as a friend why the handshake. He had explained to me why other handshakes. But this particular one, we had not had a chance. I mean, I feel sorry. Maybe it was God's wish that we didn't have time to discuss this. But my point is, let's just sit down and imagine the chaos that this country would have been going through. You know, the tension that would have been there. Right now we're experiencing peace, relative peace and calm because of that handshake, okay? Because these two people who were completely different sides had narrowed the gap, and they're working together. So if we ever took it for granted, God loves Kenya. Let me say this, and this has been said before. You know, Raila, because we're here to eulogize, we're here to speak about Raila. And when you're eulogizing, we must speak from our hearts. The man has suffered, my friend. You can imagine losing a son at his prime age. You know, the person you had placed all the hopes in, the person who was going to inherit you, both your business and your political empire. Then you lose him, he goes before you. Then you can imagine what the family has gone through. I mean, I'm just talking about a very personal level. Rosie, I mean, I remember visiting Rosie in South Africa when she was receiving treatment. You can imagine, and Raila would still stand and listen to Kenyans and serve Kenyans with a lot of diligence. He would still, you know, set aside his family and serve our nation, okay? This is not I think this is not an ordinary human being. This is a superhuman being. There's something that is so special about this man called Raila. He's a superhuman. I mean, for once, I want to agree with Kaluma that this is a superman. So I've always disagreed with Kaluma, but on this one, I think I want to agree. We have talked about Raila being very personal. Raila, I remember sometime my dear wife at that time was expecting this young man called Ethan, Raila's good friend, and they met somewhere. And of course, my wife thought, you know, I'm a small person around, and who Raila could not even remember me. And when he went to greet Raila, the Prime Minister said, Mrs. Kisia, I remember you. How is a young man doing? Because when Raila came home, my wife was expectant of this Ethan But he could remember. You can imagine a man who has so many things on his head, so many things. He could remember a minute detail, a small little detail. Now, we talked about connecting. Look at how this man is connecting with human beings. He was not just a political giant, but he was a human being beyond human being.
Okay, yeah. And I just want to read the message of condolence from Uhuru Kenyatta following the death of former Prime Minister Honorable Raila Odinga, as is on the screen. And this is from the office of the 4th President of Kenya. And he says, "My heart is heavy and my spirit is burdened with a grief that is both profound and deeply personal. The news of Raila's passing has left a silence that echoes across our nation, a silence where once there was a voice of thunder and conviction. To me, Raila was more than a political colleague. He was a defining part of my own journey in public service and in life. Raila and I were navigators on opposing currents, charting different causes for the nation we both loved. At some point along the journey, we became political opponents, and often the weight of that competition felt immense. Baba, as we fondly refer to him, was a man who made you sharpen your own ideas, compelling you to defend your positions with rigor and passion. However, in the recent years, a different bond was forged, one of respect, of shared patriotism, and a common desire to see a united Kenya. The journey from fierce political opponents to partners in the pursuit of handshake unity taught me the true measure of the man. I saw firsthand his unwavering passion for this country, his deep-seated belief in justice, and his incredible capacity to think beyond personal ambition for the sake of national peace. He was a formidable opponent, but he was an even more invaluable ally in the cause of reconciliation. I have lost a friend and a brother. I will miss our conversations, sometimes challenging, always insightful, and the fire of belief that never left his eyes. To Mama Ida, the children, and the entire Odinga family, I extend my deepest, most heartfelt condolences. You have shared Baba with Kenya for a lifetime, and we mourn with you. We have lost a father to the nation, a steadfast champion for the people, and a true son of Kenya. His legacy is not just in the political battles he fought, but in the peace he helped build. It is etched in the very fabric of our nation. Rest in peace, my friend. Your work here is done, but your echo will never fade. Signed by His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, CGH, the 4th President of the Republic of Kenya, on this 15th day of October 2025. And that is quite...
very instructive. I think even the picture that he chooses to accompany this message, and I think the honesty of the message that they charted different paths and navigated and had different sort of ideologies and ideas of where the country should go, and this almost opposing, challenging views became this political sort of theater that the country experienced between these two gentlemen. And then finally, in the final stages, they sort of come together, and his admission that he came to see his side of things and managed to see that Raila, for what everyone has said, he did put the peace of the country ahead of everything else. He thought that whatever his political ambitions were, and whatever the circumstances and ideas that he had and would bring to the table, the peace of the country would sort of be the bedrock where that would be laid. And
I think he always... he stepped back many times. I think I remember, and a number of incidents I can cite, but I remember when we were covering the Bomas conference. I mean, he was very big on a devolved system of government. He was a great proponent, I think, to his death, of the so-called Bomas draft. And the Bomas draft had a powerful prime minister and a president who was somewhat powerful, but largely ceremonial. And it's something that he believed. His idea around this was that we needed to move closer to a parliamentary system where where the prime minister, whoever became prime minister, then needed to get the majority of seats from around the country, and that would kind of ensure certain representativeness that the winner-take-it-all presidency, he believed, did not provide. However, it was interesting that at Bomas, he had, just at the very last minute, this must have been 15th of March 2004. This is when now the Bomas conference is concluding. So he says that we can have this draft passed this way, but then the current president doesn't need to worry. We can have these things then implemented after the election, because that was his idea of saying, guys, you may be threatened by this and the other thing, but don't worry, this can take effect after the election. I mean, many will recall that's the time John Mishuki had talked about the whole thing of juggling the liver, that, you know, we didn't quite mean that we wanted, you know, the powers of the presidency clipped. It was because Moi was there and we needed to have this prime minister's thing.
But now we have a new situation.
If it didn't work, then we would have the prime minister. If it worked, we'd have the presidency. That's what he meant by juggling the liver. But now that we are here, it really doesn't matter anymore. And that was quite interesting to watch him like stepping back. The other one was the KANU-NDP merger was I think, a consequential political development whose impacts we live with today. Because in one fell swoop, I think that move killed KANU, the 40-year-old independence party, the grand old party that had basically towered over the nation since independence, was basically reduced to a rubble by this act of getting into KANU and then coming out and hollowing it out completely. I mean, people who nobody would ever thought would take on any sort of challenging political task, whether you were talking about the Saitotis of this world, Mudi Awori, Kalonzo Musyoka, people who had been associated with KANU and the Moi regime all their lives. But suddenly, this gave them the courage to actually step out of KANU and imagine other political possibilities. And that was because of what he did. So what happened on March 18th, 2002 it was, where the parties merged. I remember vividly a young reporter covering the KANU-NDP merger and the KANU flag, the NDP flag coming down, the KANU flag going up. He had a political spin around it. He said, no, this is actually new KANU. But he was the only one who called it that, because he never wanted this idea to keep coming out that KANU had swallowed NDP. But then he had a twist to it. He would say, jogo ilimeza tinga-tinga, lakini tinga-tinga bado iko na nguruma huko ndani. So basically that's how KANU imploded. And so when we come to now 14th of October 2002, James, where now the Kibaki Tosha thing is coming up, it was also an interesting climb down, because remember, he had walked out of KANU with this momentum. So they have all this LDP, they are calling themselves the Rainbow, and they have come out. KANU is reduced to a shell, but still potent, because Moi was in power. And he has had a meeting in the morning with Simeon Achai, who was also running on, I think, 4 people it was. And he was very sure that Raila was going to back him. But they go to Uhuru Park, and this is literally 2 months to the election that year. They go to Uhuru Park, he looks around, and I think he also figured that that was the best way to defeat Moi at the time. So to the surprise of everybody, friends and foes,